Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash the like if you love unraveling real crimes. Drop a comment below with your thoughts because this story is as chilling as it is real, and you won't want to miss a second. Now, buckle up, this is Minnesota like you've never seen it. The winter sun had barely crested the horizon, casting pale light over the city of Minneapolis. Snow lay thick on the sidewalks, muffling the usual city noise, giving the streets a ghostly quiet. But the calm was deceptive. Inside a modest apartment on the north side, tension crackled in the air, invisible but palpable. On the street below, a line of black SUVs rolled past silently, their tires crunching the icy pavement. Inside one of them, ICE agents checked their equipment, eyes flicking over radios and firearms, mentally rehearsing the day's operation. It was supposed to be routine, a set of immigration enforcement actions in neighborhoods known for complex, high-risk situations. But routine rarely survives the friction of reality. At precisely 8:14 a.m., the first call came into the precinct. A neighbor had spotted a figure darting across an alley, glancing nervously over their shoulder. The description was brief, but enough. Male, early 30s, moving fast, suspicious. By the time officers arrived, the figure had vanished into the lattice of streets and snow-dusted alleyways. Across town, in another part of the city, the Preddy family stirred their morning coffee. Their children laughed in the kitchen, oblivious to the tension creeping through the neighborhoods. It was a day like any other, except for the presence of law enforcement that had begun to dominate public spaces, a heavy-handed shadow that some residents feared more than the criminals it sought to catch. But fear is a subtle weapon. And on this day, it would shape everything. The first report of shots rang out at 8:42 a.m. Witnesses described sudden chaos. People screaming, the sound of gunfire ricocheting off brick buildings, a rush of fear so immediate it froze them in place. For those on the scene, it wasn't just a shooting, it was a collision of worlds. A federal operation, a civilian caught in the crossfire, and the invisible thread of legal authority, tangled and confusing. Detective Marcus Harlow arrived within minutes. He was a veteran, a man whose calm in the face of violence had earned him respect and enemies. But nothing could have prepared him for the scene. A body sprawled on the frozen pavement, snow-stained dark in places, a crowd held back by uniformed officers whose faces mirrored the same shock he felt inside. The victim, identified later as Javier Mendoza, had been moving from one errand to another, unaware that his every step was being watched by agents with split-second powers of judgment. "What happened here?" Harlow muttered, his eyes scanning the scene. "Shots fired by federal agents," one officer replied, voice tense. "They claim he was a threat." "So it's messy." Messy was an understatement. People remembered seeing Javier pull a small object from his coat, a cell phone, maybe a set of keys. But in the chaos, it looked threatening. Training, perception, fear, all collided in an instant, and a life ended before it could make sense. Inside the ICE command vehicle, Agent Ramirez pressed a hand to his forehead. He had followed procedure. He had been trained for split-second decisions, yet he couldn't shake the thought that something had gone horribly wrong. The law gave him power, but it also demanded judgment that could never be undone. Meanwhile, journalists swarmed the edges of the cordoned area. Phones clicked, cameras whirred, and social media lit up with fragments of the scene. The story exploded online before most officers had finished their initial reports. ICE shooting in Minneapolis, man dead, community shocked, one headline screamed. Another post questioned, was it justified? Did anyone really have a chance? The narrative split along invisible fault lines. To some, the agents were heroes maintaining law and order. To others, they were an unstoppable force crushing everyday life under legal authority and fear. In every home, in every cafe, and along every snow-covered street, the debate simmered, mixing anger with grief and a desperate need for understanding. Harlow and his team began piecing together the events. Surveillance cameras along the main street offered brief glimpses of Javier, a man moving briskly, seemingly unaware of the convoy of black SUVs shadowing him. Audio from nearby businesses captured screams, the unmistakable report of gunfire, and in the chaos, the sound of shattering glass. Every detail mattered. Every frame could change the interpretation of what was legal, what was reckless, and what was tragically human. But the more they investigated, the murkier it became. Witnesses contradicted one another. Agent statements varied in subtle ways, each one plausible, yet inconsistent. And then came the tip that changed everything. A neighbor remembered seeing Javier argue with someone the night before, a dispute over immigration documents. A private lawyer had been involved, a case lingering on bureaucratic timelines, promises made, promises broken. Harlow felt the weight of it all. Justice was not a simple equation. It was a maze, and he had just stepped into its deadliest corners. The intersection of law, perception, and fear had already claimed one life. And in the shadows of Minnesota's frozen streets, more secrets waited. By mid-morning, the precinct was a flurry of activity. Forensic teams collected shell casings, dusted for fingerprints, and photographed every inch of the sidewalk where Javier had fallen. Detectives conducted preliminary interviews with neighbors and witnesses, trying to reconcile human memory with cold, hard evidence. Each answer generated new questions. Why had the agents decided he was a threat? Could the outcome have been different? Who else had seen the confrontation, and what would they say if questioned under oath? At the same time, news outlets picked up the story nationwide. Experts weighed in on legal authority, on the limits of federal power, on what constitutes a perceived threat. Civil rights groups began mobilizing, asking for transparency, accountability, and a thorough investigation. And in every corner of the city, people wondered, how safe were they really in a world where a single mistake or misjudgment could end a life? But the tension was far from over. Late that evening, as Harlow returned to the precinct to review the day's findings, a call came through. It was the lab. A trace evidence report had just arrived, something small, almost invisible. A fragment of material, fibers, residue, linked Javier's coat to an unknown source. Someone had been with him, someone who might explain everything, or change the story entirely. Harlow stared at the evidence, a chill running down his spine. In the silence of the precinct, amidst the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of city traffic, he realized that the day's events were only the beginning. And as the night closed over Minneapolis, one question loomed larger than any other. Who was really responsible for what happened on that icy street, and how far would the truth go to stay hidden? And then, as if the city itself were holding its breath, Harlow opened the latest folder from the lab. Inside was a name, one that no one had expected, one that would turn the investigation upside down. But that revelation would have to wait. Because when they opened the locked basement door of a nearby residence later that night, what they found changed everything. You thought this was shocking? Wait until you see who was really behind the chaos, and the secret connections no one saw coming. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, you don't want to miss out what next. Secrets beneath the ice. Before we get into this, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and smash the like. Because the story you're about to hear is so shocking, you'll want to come back for every twist. Trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. The Minneapolis night had deepened into something almost unnatural. A silence so complete it pressed against the ears, broken only by the occasional crunch of snow under hurried footsteps. Detective Marcus Harlow stood in the icy alleyway behind a nondescript townhouse, staring at the basement door that now seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The forensic team had taped it off hours ago, but Harlow knew that opening it would change everything, and possibly put more lives at risk. He exhaled, fog spilling from his mouth, and turned to Agent Ramirez, whose hands trembled slightly despite years of federal experience. "Are we ready for this?" Harlow asked. Ramirez nodded, though his eyes betrayed the unease both men shared. This wasn't just another case. It was a collision of law, fear, and something far darker. As the door creaked open, a chill rolled out, heavier than the cold air outside. The basement was small, cluttered, almost claustrophobic, with shadows pooling in corners like liquid. But it wasn't the clutter that made Harlow pause. It was what they found tucked in the far corner, a series of notebooks, documents, and a small hard drive hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Harlow knelt, gingerly lifting the items. The handwriting was meticulous, precise. Someone had planned, recorded, and possibly anticipated every move. Names, dates, addresses, even strategies that could explain how Javier Mendoza had come to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The pieces of the puzzle were here, but they were dangerous, each one capable of igniting public outrage if they leaked. "Guys," Harlow said, his voice low but intense, "this isn't just evidence. This is a roadmap. And someone doesn't want us to find it. If you think you're ready to uncover the truth behind this, hit subscribe now. You'll want to be here for every revelation, and believe me, it's going to get darker before it gets lighter." Back at the precinct, the team began analyzing the materials. The notebooks detailed a complex network of surveillance and informants, seemingly mundane contacts like delivery drivers and janitors, but in reality, people who had unwittingly fed information about community members into federal operations. It wasn't just Javier. Dozens of lives intersected with this invisible web of observation. Detective Harlow felt a growing unease. The more he read, the more he realized that the shooting was not an isolated event. Someone had been orchestrating this, creating a situation where fear could justify action, and action could justify outcomes that were otherwise incomprehensible. A text alert pinged on Ramirez's phone. It was anonymous. "You're digging too deep. Stop before it's too late." Harlow looked up. Too late? Too late for who? His mind raced. Could this warning be tied to someone within the federal operation itself, or was it a threat from outside? Either way, it meant that someone was watching them, just as they had watched Javier. The next day, news reports began to highlight inconsistencies in the official story. Social media posts circulated videos shot by witnesses, shaky, yet revealing moments that federal statements had omitted. A key clip showed Javier's hands raised slightly, a gesture of non-aggression, seconds before the shots rang out. It was enough to ignite online debates and furious commentary. Harlow realized something critical. The public narrative was slipping out of their control. And when the narrative escapes, it can ignite consequences no one anticipates. If this makes you question what really happens behind closed doors, smash that like button and drop a comment below. What would you do if you were in Javier's shoes? Your opinion matters, and I want to read it. By mid-afternoon, the investigation had taken another sharp turn. The hard drive recovered from the basement contained encrypted files, video surveillance, intercepted communications, and maps marked with precise times and locations. It suggested premeditation at a scale that was almost unimaginable. The team realized they were dealing with an operation that had been quietly active for months, if not years, intersecting with law enforcement in ways that blurred ethical lines. As Harlow dug deeper, he uncovered something that chilled him to the bone. Javier wasn't just a random target. His family, his friends, even his legal counsel had been monitored. Every interaction, every phone call, every errand, it had been recorded. Someone had engineered the environment to make Javier appear as a threat. And that realization hit harder than any bullet could. The detective and his team had to act fast. They traced digital footprints from the hard drive to a server in an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. It was cold, silent, and the kind of place where a person could disappear without a trace. Harlow felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. One wrong step could tip the balance between exposure and complete loss of control. Inside the warehouse, the team found more than they expected. A wall lined with monitors, showing live feeds from various points across the city, including residential areas, public spaces, and government offices. Someone had been watching the city like a chessboard, predicting moves, anticipating reactions. The scale of the surveillance operation was staggering, and the implications were terrifying. If your heart is racing right now, you need to hit subscribe. The next chapter will reveal who was really behind this web of surveillance and how far they were willing to go to protect their secrets. You won't believe what comes next. As night fell, Harlow reviewed the footage again. There was a pattern, a rhythm that hinted at the next move. Someone close to the investigation was compromised. A trusted informant, someone Harlow had relied on for years, had been feeding information back to the perpetrators. Betrayal was no longer theoretical, it was a cold, tangible reality. And then came the final shocking discovery of the day: a recorded phone call on the hard drive. Javier's voice was clear, pleading for understanding, arguing about a legal issue that could have saved him. But another voice, calm, chilling, almost procedural, responded, "Do what you must. The order stands. No exceptions." Harlow froze. The order, it wasn't from a rogue agent in the field. It was authorized at a level higher than anyone had imagined. The shooting, the fear, the chaos, it had been sanctioned. The weight of that revelation hung over the precinct like a storm cloud. And as the clock struck midnight, Harlow knew that uncovering the full truth would take everything he had and likely put him in danger. If your mind is blown by these revelations like this video, hit subscribe and comment your thoughts. Who do you think gave the orders? The next chapter will reveal the shocking climax of this case. Turn on notifications, because you cannot afford to miss it. The hidden orders and final reckoning. Before we get into the final jaw-dropping chapter, if you've been following along, smash that subscribe button now. Hit the like if this story has your heart racing, and leave a comment. Your thoughts could be part of the conversation that exposes the truth. This chapter will reveal secrets no one expected. The night air outside Minneapolis felt heavier than ever, a suffocating mix of snow, frost, and tension. Detective Marcus Harlow couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow was hiding something, or someone, watching his every move. The warehouse, now secured, had revealed the terrifying scale of surveillance. But that was only the beginning. The orders, the recordings, the betrayals, they all pointed to a single conclusion. Someone powerful was pulling the strings, and they weren't finished. Harlow sat at his desk, replaying the recording of Javier's last conversation. The calm, almost clinical voice giving the order to use lethal force haunted him. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just an operational error. This was deliberate. Someone had engineered the situation to create a justification for deadly force, and the ripple effects were just beginning. The detective's phone buzzed. Another anonymous tip: check the transport logs. Look for the name that never left the building. Harlow's blood ran cold. That single clue could unravel everything. He and Ramirez pored over the federal transport schedules, cross-referencing times, agents, and movements. And there it was, a name that shouldn't have appeared: Agent Peter Langston, a man considered reliable, professional, and incorruptible. Except the logs indicated he had been in 2 places at once during the day of the shooting. Someone had manipulated the records. If you want to see how Harlow confronts the person behind this, hit subscribe now. You'll need to watch every second to understand the final twist, and trust me, it's going to shock you. The next morning, Harlow and his team set out to confront Langston. They approached his apartment, every step deliberate, every breath calculated. Inside, Langston appeared calm, too calm. He invited them in, smiling politely, his hands resting on the table as if the past events were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "You're wasting your time," Langston said. "Everything that happened was within protocol. Nothing you see changes that." Harlow leaned forward. "Don't lie to me. We have the recordings, the surveillance network, the manipulated logs. Someone wanted Javier Mendoza dead, and we know you had access to every step of that operation." Langston's smile didn't waver. "Access isn't intent. You think you understand the law, detective, but you're only scratching the surface." The tension was palpable. Every word, every gesture, a battle of control. Harlow realized that this man had been trained not just in enforcement, but in psychological warfare. And the clock was ticking. The longer this confrontation lasted, the more risk there was that evidence could disappear, or worse, that Langston could vanish. Outside, the city moved unaware of the storm unfolding in that small apartment. People shoveled snow, cars hummed past, and life went on, indifferent to the shadows of power manipulating their reality. But inside, decisions made in minutes would define lives for years to come. If your heart is pounding right now, smash that like button and drop a comment. What would you have done if you were Harlow, facing a man like Langston? I want to see your theories before we reveal the truth. Harlow took a calculated risk. He revealed the hard drive, the notebooks, the recordings, evidence impossible to deny. Langston's calm demeanor cracked slightly, a flicker of something human crossing his face. "Fine," he admitted, his voice low. "Javier was a pawn, yes. But not the only one. You've uncovered the tip of the iceberg." He gestured to the files, to the monitors. "There are others, civilians, agents, even higher-ups. Some are still in control, some compromised. But the operation isn't over. If this leaks, the consequences will be catastrophic." Harlow realized the enormity of the revelation. The shooting was not an isolated tragedy. It was part of a network, a mechanism designed to instill fear, manipulate perception, and enforce compliance. The implications went far beyond a single death. Langston's words sent chills through the room. "You think you've won? You've only just begun to understand the game." If this twists your mind, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next few minutes reveal the shocking climax, the truth that no one saw coming, and the final revelation that will leave you speechless. Harlow didn't flinch. He knew that the only way to bring closure was to expose the operation fully. Back at the precinct, he compiled all evidence into a single, undeniable report. Every name, every order, every manipulated record, all documented, all ready for the authorities and public scrutiny. The media storm hit within hours. Investigative journalists, civil rights groups, and online commentators pounced. Public outrage surged as the full story came to light. The shooting, the surveillance network, the hidden orders, and the betrayal of trust. Langston and others were placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. But just when it seemed that justice might prevail, one final piece of evidence surfaced, a hidden audio recording, never previously disclosed, in which a high-ranking official implied that such operations were necessary to maintain control, and that the consequences for exposure were collateral. The city of Minneapolis shivered under the weight of the revelation. Fear, outrage, and questions about civil liberties erupted across the nation. And for Harlow, the victory was bittersweet. He had uncovered the truth, but the human cost, Javier's life, the community's trust, the shadow of fear, could never be fully repaired. If this ending left you stunned, like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more shocking true crime stories. Who do you think was really pulling the strings behind the scenes? Let's talk about it. Your comment could spark the next big investigation. As the camera pans over the city streets, snow glinting under the streetlights, the lesson is clear. Power unchecked, fear amplified, and decisions made in seconds can reverberate far beyond the moment. And even when the truth is exposed, the echoes of a single life lost remain. Harlow knew one thing for certain: the game wasn't over. And somewhere, in the cold shadows of the city, the next chapter of human greed, fear, and courage was already waiting.